What's going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video, to start things off, we are going to be covering a performance improvement that we can make in the application and solving this issue that we saw at the end of the last video. So I'm just going to go ahead and recreate it to start things off. Go to the Explore page and click on Ironman. And I added this print statement in the function where we fetch our user stats. And you guys will notice that we're getting this back twice. So we are making unnecessary network calls here to fetch data, guys. And this is bad for all different kinds of reasons. One being that we don't want to waste network calls because it's going to cost us more money at the end. You guys could imagine if we had 1 million users in the application and every time somebody went to somebody's profile, it made 2 network calls instead of 1, or 4 network calls instead of 2, or 8 instead of 4, that this would get extremely costly. And it's definitely going to be an issue that we want to solve. So let's go ahead and dive into why it's happening and how we can fix it. So something interesting I want you guys to pay attention to, let's just highlight these really quickly, and then let's go to the current user profile page. You guys will notice that we only get that print statement back once. So this indicates to me that this is not a problem with our networking layer or how we've written our code, guys, but more so a problem with the SwiftUI functionality and how SwiftUI works. So that's what the issue is going to be caused by. It's actually because of how things get initialized in SwiftUI. And we're going to go ahead and go to the profile view model and see that this is going to happen regardless of whether or not we have these network calls in here. So let's go ahead and just comment this code out really quickly. And I want us to add a print statement here that just says print debug did init. And let's run our code again. And you guys are going to notice that we get this print statement back here as well, twice. So we go here and we see that we did init twice. So this view is actually getting initialized twice. So this is not an issue with how we set up our networking layer, but more so how SwiftUI initializes things. And Apple actually recommends that you don't put a lot of complex code inside of your initialization methods, guys, because of things like this. SwiftUI is constantly initializing and deinitializing or throwing away views and recreating them. So anything like network calls and stuff that you have in your application, you're going to want to leave that out of your init method. So you guys might be asking, okay, well, how do we, not do that, right? Like, how do we fire off these calls? What's going to be in charge of making these network calls if we can't put it in the initialization method? And lucky for us, SwiftUI has some useful modifiers that we can use to take care of this stuff for us. So basically, guys, we're going to call this fetch user stats and check if user guy is followed guy from our profile header view. So we can go here and let's just highlight this entire VStack. And you guys can go and say dot on appear. And you can say viewModel dot fetch user stats and viewModel dot check if user is followed. So now if we go back to the profile view model, guys, we can just delete these and leave everything else as is. Run our code again. And let's go ahead and go to Ironman's profile. And you guys will see here that we did fetch our user stats still, but it's only happening once now, which is awesome, right? So even though we're initializing this view twice, and that's firing off twice, the onAppear method only gets called once. So that is a quick fix for that problem. And we can take this a step further, guys. I just want to dive a little bit deeper into this and get some more into some of the inner workings of Swift concurrency and how this stuff works. So what's happening here, guys, is we are firing off 2 tasks simultaneously. And these tasks can run independently of one another. So if you were to wrap this all in one task and set it up like this, like for example, if we were to put this up here, the way Swift concurrency works is it would fetch our user stats first, and then it would check to see if the user was followed. So this is what it looks like if things happen within a single task. But what we are doing is something that is equivalent to this. We have 2 tasks running simultaneously or concurrently, and there is no race condition here, or there is no wait for one to finish before the other one starts. This is not happening synchronously. So this is an important concept to understand here, guys. We can have these 2 tasks that exist independently of one another, because they are not dependent on one another, right? Like, we don't need to fetch the user stats in order to check to see if the user is followed. They can exist independently of one another. So that's how we have the code set up here, and it's looking pretty good. Another way that you guys could do this is to go back to your profile header view. And these are currently wrapped in tasks in the view model, but SwiftUI also has this new task modifier that you can use to fire off tasks, and you can add as many of them as you want. So this would be another way of accomplishing sort of the same thing. But right now, it's pretty much equivalent to what we have here, so we can just leave this as is. So that looks pretty good right now, guys. Now, what I want us to do next to move forward with this video is go over how we can start to click on these followers and following guys to actually display the users associated with that list of people. So let's see what it looks like in the completed app. So I can go to my current user profile and I can click on this list, and it will display the list of people that I have as followers, and this list is searchable as well. And I could do the same thing for following, right? I can see who I'm following here, and I can do that for any user profile, right? So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and see if we can go over how to implement that functionality. So the first thing we need to do, guys, is set these up as navigation links. So we're going to want to create some sort of data type or data structure that represents each one of these different types of relations that we can have, so that when we click on them, it can be recognized as a value-based navigation link, so that we can go over to some sort of new screen in order to display that particular set of users that correspond to that particular type. So what I want us to do, guys, is hop down to our model folder, and we are going to make a new file. And it's going to be a Swift file, and we're going to call this user list config. So why user list config? Because basically, guys, we're going to set this enumeration up to display any type of list of users that we want. So basically, for example, in our Explore view, we want to display all the users in our application, right? Whereas in our followers view, we only want to display followers, that list of users. And then we also want to be able to potentially display a list of users that have liked a particular post. So we're going to handle all of those different potential lists of users, or types of different configurations for lists of users in this data object here. So it's going to be an enum user list config, and it's going to conform to the Hashable protocol. And the reason for that, guys, is because ultimately this needs to be able to be some navigatable type, right? We need to be able to set this up as a navigation link and be able to click on one of these guys and have it be associated with a unique type, and that will correspond to the different cases in this enum. And in order to do that, you need to conform to the Hashable protocol. So the first type we're going to have is followers. And then we're going to have following. Then we're going to have likes. And then we'll have the explore case. So guys, these are all the lists of different types of list of users we're going to be able to have. So we need to take this a step further, though. So what I mean by that is, when you're displaying followers, you're displaying the followers for a particular person or user in the application. So we need some means of like creating an associated value that will allow us to do that. So here we need to add a string. Basically, this will represent the UID. So we could go here and say UID, which is a string, and build just to make sure that nothing goes wrong there with their syntax, right? And then here we need to do the same thing. And then here we also need an ID for the post. So I'm going to break this down just a little further. So once again, guys, when you're viewing the followers or the following, that corresponds to a particular user ID. So we need to be able to look at the UID of the person that we're trying to fetch all of this list of users for. And it's a very similar concept with our post. We need to be able to fetch the people who have liked a particular post, and we're going to link that with this post ID here. And explore, we don't really need an associated value, and that's because we're just fetching all the users in the application, right? So there's no associated value needed there. So that is looking really, really clean. I want us to take this one step further, guys, and add a navigation title property. So we're going to say navigation title, which is a string. And this is going to correspond to the navigation title we have for each one of these types. So for example, when I'm on this list, it's explore. If I'm here, it's followers. If I'm here, it's following. And then obviously, if I am looking at the likes of a post, it is likes, right? So let's do that. We're going to say switch self case.followers. And for this, guys, we don't need the UID. So we're just going to say return followers case.following, return following, case.likes, return likes, case.explore, return explore. Perfect. All right, so this is our data model for this guy. We might put this in a different location later on, but for now, let's just leave it in this sort of shared model folder, guys. Okay, so what next? So basically, now inside of our profile header view, what we want to do is set up this guy as a navigation link and this guy as a navigation link. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So the reason we don't set it up for post, guys, is because when you hit post, it doesn't actually do anything, right? I think in Instagram, it might just scroll you down to their posts, but we're not going to bother with that. So these are the only two guys that need to be navigation links here. So what we're going to do is say we want to create a navigation link, and you're going to select this option that says value and label. Okay. So what's the value going to be? And what's the label going to be? Well, the label is simple, right? The label is just going to be this user stat view. The value, however, is a little bit trickier. So what we want to make this, guys, is our user list config dot followers, okay? And make sure you make these match up, because this is displaying our followers, and we want this config to match up with that guy. And the user ID we're going to pass in, guess what? We already have the user that we're passing into this profile header view. So here we're going to say user.id. And then we are going to do the same thing for this guy here. Just rip that out and paste that in there. And make sure this is following. So following, followers, followers. So this is more in-depth and intricate navigation link setups, guys. So this is not the type of data that we're used to setting up navigation links for. We're used to doing it for like a user. This is more of a custom like enumeration that has different cases associated with it. And then each one of those cases has its own associated value with that. So pretty intricate here, but it should make sense up until this point, right? So basically, we're setting up a navigation link for this data type right here, the user list config.followers, so that when I click on followers, I want to go and ultimately show some list of users and fetch the followers for that user. Well, how do I know which user it's supposed to be for? That's where we get this guy right here. We pass this user ID in to this associated value for that, that list of followers. So that is going to allow us to fetch the followers for that particular user. So next up, what we can do, guys, is set up our navigation destination. So this link has to take us to some destination, and we have to pass that destination over some kind of data, right? So we've already set all of that up. We basically want to say, hey, go to this destination, pass this data along so that the view that I go to, or that destination view, knows how to fetch the information it needs to. So we can set that navigation link up on this profile header view if we want. So I can say .navigation destination for, and we're going to say user list config.self. And here we're going to say config in. So this is very, very important to understand, guys. this sort of ties this whole navigation setup together. We're saying that, hey, whenever a user list config is clicked on, right? And we set that up here with these navigation links, right? The value is this user list config dot followers or dot following, right? So when this navigation destination modifier will get called when one of those user list configs gets clicked on. And here inside of this block, we have access to that config. So now let's just go ahead and create like some random view, and we can say text config dot navigation title. And let's go ahead and see if this is working. So we can go here, and I can click on following. And you guys will notice that when I click following, it takes me over to a screen that says following. And that's because that is a navigation title that conforms to or corresponds to the config that I clicked on. Here I can't click on anything, or I can. We'll disable those navigation links in a little bit if there's nobody there. But you guys notice now it says followers. So this is looking really good, right? I can click on this and it recognizes the configuration that was clicked on, and it gives me back the navigation title. And if I click on this guy, it recognizes that the following configuration was clicked, and it gives me back this navigation title. So I'm really trying to hammer this concept home, guys, because like I said, this is more intricate navigation link stuff. And this is why the new navigation stack in API is so amazing that SwiftUI gives us. Doing this before with the previous navigation API would have been very difficult. But this value-based or data-driven navigation that we get access to allows us to set this up this way, which really, really allows us to get the navigation functionality that we really should have had all along. So we got to thank SwiftUI for finally coming through with that. So next up, guys, what we're going to do, and I think we're just going to leave this for the next video, is going over how to fetch the particular list of users that correspond to this configuration that we clicked on. So obviously, when I click following, I want to fetch all of the following users for that particular user, right? And the same for followers. If I click followers, I need to recognize that the followers config was clicked and fetch all of the followers for that particular user. So we're going to be doing that in the next video. This one was awesome, guys. We fixed that bug and made that performance improvement for fetching our user stats. And we also got our navigation links set up to be able to display the different types of user relations that a user has. And you guys will notice that that works from our guest user profile as well.